What advice would you give to a puppeteer who wants to take the jump and move to New York City?
It's not easy.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. I'm your host, Adam Kreutinger, and today we have Cameron Garrity back as our co-host.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, and today is a very special episode. We have Jess Simon on. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So we wanted to have you on. You were one of our original members of the Puppeteers guest list of people we had in mind. And specifically, you and I have worked together quite a bit at the O'Neill and with your project, Ruby and Charlie. And just wanted to open with a quick story was that I was able to get to my first O'Neill because of a grant process that I did through my school at Damon College. And I actually included a clip of your first swing dancers number as like, this is what I could learn if you guys pay for me to go to this thing. And then at my first O'Neill meeting you, and I think it was my second or third that I was in your resident company. So Jess Simon, welcome to Puppeteers. And we're so happy to have you here talking with us.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Any new projects?
No, it's just kind of still the perpetual Ruby and Charlie years long. It's actually, since I did the residency in October, it's all gone back in the closet. So I don't have a project of my own I'm actively working on right now, but I'd love to be a hand on someone else's. So I'm just kind of, working to pay the bills.
So what would be the next step with that project, though, now that you did?
Well, let's back up just for a second for people who don't know. So Ruby and Charlie has been a bit of a pet project of yours for a while. Can you describe what that show is for those who don't know?
Yeah, it's a tabletop show that's all inspired by the music of Ray Charles. And I started it at the O'Neill as a participant piece, which I guess that's what you had a clip of. And it was really just starting as an experiment to see what it would be like to have tabletop puppets swing dance, because I wanted to combine two things that I really like doing, and to see how that would work, what it would look like. And I picked a Ray Charles song, Hallelujah, I Love Her So, because it was one that when I would be out dancing, if the DJ would put it on, it would be like, okay, that was one that would really perk up my ears. So we did that. I had an awesome group who helped me figure out how that would work, and it turned out really nice. And I ended up doing that later at the National Slam at one of the P of A festivals, and did another participant project where I took another Ray Charles song. The Hallelujah, I Love Her So felt like fun beginning of a relationship, and I wanted to know what it might be like to look at sort of the end of a relationship. So I picked another song, and I wanted to play with the forms of the people. If the man was represented by something sort of more abstract and the woman was a human, that was sort of less successful. But anyway, it's sort of grown and merged over the years, and at the residency, it's now become a full length, like 45-minute piece of tabletop puppetry, and we have a live band now.
Ooh,
so
that's
awesome!
Nice.
So this is the Jim Henson residency at the O'Neill, right?
Yeah.
And so you were there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's
we were there for 2 weeks. I had a team of 6 puppeteers and then a music director who was there the whole time. And then we had 3 musicians join us for the second week.
That's incredible. Yeah, and I remember from even back when you were doing it as an emerging artist at the O'Neill, when you get about like 13 minutes or so to present a short version of it, you were talking back then even about wanting to have the live band and really make it this big show. So I was so glad to see that you were able to do that. And it also earned you an UNIMA citation, didn't it?
When I think it was the performance at the National Festival.
Okay.
Was I think sort of what folks saw, and it was very much a surprise to be notified of that, especially because I didn't feel like the show wasn't done yet, and it was still mock-up puppets, and so it was very nice. I didn't feel totally deserving of that, but they should come and see the final version.
Definitely. So how much did it change from when you were kind of early in the process of developing it? I imagine that you were probably able to kind of break the form a little bit, maybe once you had a live band, and I shouldn't say break the form. How do I want to ask this? You were probably having a bit more freedom because you weren't dependent on the actual tracks anymore.
Right.
How did that change it?
So I didn't actually know, leading up, there was a lot of emailing and logistical stuff, and I was wearing a lot of hats sort of leading up to the O'Neill, and I had people asking me, are you ready? Are you ready? And I was like, yeah, things will happen. The time will arrive. People will be there. But I hadn't really had a lot of time to think about what the end of the show would look like or what songs we might use. So it wasn't until we were there that I, not totally randomly, picked the last handful of songs to round out the show. But I didn't really have a ton of time to do some deep thinking, and it was like, let's try this one. So the musicians being there, it was definitely a bit of navigating when music was leading, when puppets were leading. And once the whole band was in the room, we had, so my music director, Simone, played piano and sang. And we had Julian on vocals, and then we had Sam on trumpet and Magda on upright bass. So they were a really awesome little quartet, and having them all in the room to see what we were doing on stage was great, because they could all together sort of watch what was happening and see what we needed in terms of underscoring. And I told Simone at the get-go, I was like, I don't really speak music, so we might need some translation. And I would be like, can we have some sexy trumpet here? And Sam would be like, okay, I see what you're doing. I know what I can try. So that was great. The music absolutely changed. Just the feeling and mood of it. And the first day they were all there and everyone was in rehearsal, I asked them to just play through the first song we were going to start with, was Ruby. And I was like about ready to cry, because it was like, they sounded wonderful, and it was just like, oh my God, it's all happening. So yeah, it was really, really wonderful.
That's great.
Cool. Let's get the listeners a little sense of the time too. So from the time that you first kind of came up with the idea to it being an emerging artist piece, all the way to the residency, like how big of a time frame is that?
Let's see. I did the initial swing dance as a participant piece at the O'Neill in, I want to say
2011, probably.
Yep, because the first participant piece I did, the Tallys, was 2009. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was 2011. And then I did it as an emerging artist in 2014? Or what year was that, Cam?
It would have been 2014. Yeah.
Yeah, 2014. And then the residency was 2018. 18. I did another residency in 2016 at Residency Upstate called The Freight, run by Rachel Shane. So that was 2016, and then we showed it at Dixon Place. So it's kind of been every 2 years. Slow goings, but you know, it's been amazing to have the O'Neill as that place to do that work. But then it's kind of like, I don't know how to do work without that kind of environment or support, and how to do my own work anyway.
Yeah, it is nice having that kind of support and stuff. You know, you just see all these people around you working and hustling, and just inspires you to want to create more.
Yeah, the thing that was cool about, or it was a little strange about being there during our residency in September, was we were the only people there. So we just kind of had free run of the place, but it was also very quiet.
Yeah. Well, and it must have been weird just to be there at a different season of the year also, because we're there in June most of the time.
Yeah.
No, I got another question about it. You know, as artists, I think a lot of artists struggle with having too many ideas and narrowing one down, picking one to be the one to work on for that long, because you've worked on this for years. So what about this project made you think like, okay, this is the one I want to be, you know, pretty much all in on for the next couple of years? You know, how is it choosing? It's like picking a favorite kid or something, I think.
Yeah, I didn't, it wasn't that sort of thought process that like, I'm all in on this and for the next decade. Like it was just doing that initial participant piece with the swing dancers was really just an experiment, and was really the second thing I made of my own. So it's only been in tiny increments that like, okay, these things worked from the previous version. I want to keep those and try and look at these new experiments in this next version. And really I've lucked out every single time I've gone to work on it with the group of folks that I get to work with, because it always changes and is added to by the puppeteers I get to work with. So that really affects things too.
And another thing, so you mentioned that the swing dancing was a love of yours.
Yeah.
And translating that to the puppetry, which can enhance things, but also limits the performance in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the ways that you overcame that in translating the dance to that scale? Because I think that's something that a lot of people have to struggle with when they do tabletop puppetry, any kind of puppetry, but especially tabletop. What was your sort of creative process in translating that into choreographing for puppets?
Well, it's like I said, it's always been a major collaboration with the folks that I get to work with. So a lot of times it's maybe watching some videos, or if we can, watching people dance in person to really sort of break down what's happening, where and when, like who's got an arm where, and then seeing what we're watching actual humans do and how that might translate. You know, a lot of the spins and things you can't necessarily pull off elegantly with a puppet, but how you might modify those to still kind of give that effect. It's just a bit of trial and error and a lot of rewinding YouTube videos. Because that's actually one of the things we did at the O'Neill. I said I didn't know sort of how the end of the story went, but I kind of knew where I wanted to get to, which was a big dance number. So we found these YouTube videos of these college students just running through a bunch of different swing aerial tricks. And we were like, let's try that one. So then we would get the puppets out and sort of slow down the video and try and take a look at like the physics of it and how that might translate. And then we just sort of put them all together, tried them with music, and, you know, made adjustments from there.
That's really cool. And then you also were able to incorporate other styles as well. Like you mentioned some of the full-size things, and I know there was shadow puppetry as well, and that helps round it out a little bit too.
So it's actually, there's no more shadow stuff in it, and there's no more, it's all just tabletop puppets and sort of some object-y things. I got the shadow stuff. I thought it, you know, and what we did during the emerging artist time, I really liked that shadow section, but then when it came time to sort of look at how, it didn't really make sense because there wasn't a time for more shadow stuff to happen. So, and I liked actually the I've Got News for You, which was the section with the newspaper man and the actual human woman. As a standalone thing, turned out really fun when I did it. I sort of revisited it in Chicago, but it also didn't fit in within the show. So we sort of simplified things a bit. I mean, it's still a lot of performers having 6 people, but it's just tabletop puppets.
Well, and that's an interesting insight into just developing a long show like this, of knowing that, you know, if the final product is 45 minutes, it means that you've probably created, you know, another half hour of stuff that's on the cutting room floor, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
It's great. So you said it's kind of in a closet for now until
yeah, you know,
else comes along.
Like I said, leading up to the residency, I was just wearing a lot of hats, and I would really love to have the show produced, to have it in a venue for a few weeks so more people can see it, and then it would be amazing to be able to tour it around to some places. I think I've sort of reached a limit of hats I can wear. I need to, I think, partner with a producer who can speak that language better than I can. You know, I had to give myself a bit of an education in terms of music licensing leading up to the residency. And I think it was okay for me to figure out just that amount on my own. But in terms of dealing with a venue and people actually buying tickets, like, that changes everything. Excuse me, that changes everything. So yeah, I need to find some sort of partner in that endeavor, because it's just a little too much.
Sure.
Because actually the thing with the residency at the O'Neill, all of the projects that had been there before me were teams of people, or at least partners. And this was just me, and I was kind of like, you know, we made it all happen, and it was, I had a great team while we were there, but it's, you know, assembling all of those pieces that was kind of, got to be a lot. So I don't know that I could take on all of that myself in terms of producing it. No, so if you know anybody,
we'll talk after.
Yeah, great.
No, it's a huge endeavor, and I'm sure, yeah, the music rights thing must just be really a challenge when you're doing that kind of stuff. I mean, all the way around, but it's an added component that you wouldn't have to deal with otherwise.
Right.
Cool.
Is it available on YouTube or anything for people to check it out as well?
There are some snippets here and there. from previous iterations. We did film what we did at the residency, but that's mostly just to remember what we did. And if there are like potential producer people, to share it with them, but it's not, you know, it doesn't translate quite as well. It wasn't made to be a film, so it's better live. So it's not something I want to like put out just for anyone to watch.
Oh, sure, of course, yeah. It's something I've been thinking a lot about, though, like that kind of like a tabletop style, or just really other types of puppetry in general that are more meant to be seen in person. If there's creative ways to make not necessarily a film out of it, but to film it in a way to get a better sense of it, though. I think we can all agree that, you know, seeing it in person is the best way. But I think about like Broadway shows as well, and the way that they film a lot of them now and sometimes release them. Without a doubt, it's not the same, but there's still a lot that can be gained by it, and I think a lot of people can still respond to it in a positive way. And you know, you can't argue with the reach that you would get with it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think it could be something to adapt. If there were, I don't know if that would mean sort of green screening it or putting everyone in hoods and gloves. But because it is fairly contained in a specific area, I think, yeah, you could absolutely figure out a way to modify some things to film it and have it work on film.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need a puppetry person that can, like, someone like Alex Griffin, that can like really like have their thing be to put all this type of art, make a new type of film art for puppetry that's like beyond just documenting and filming, you know, these kinds of live productions. That'd be cool. Get on it, somebody.
If Alex Griffin is watching. No.
That's right.
Anyhow, so we'd love to go kind of back in time a little bit and talk about how all this stuff happened for you in general. When did puppetry start for you?
Like most kids, you know, playing with stuffed animals and dolls and that sort of thing, was something that just kept my interest. And of course, with like Muppets and Lamb Chop and all that sort of thing that you're watching as a kid, that was something that I always really enjoyed. In terms of actually like actively learning or participating, I guess that would have been, it was a summer break between I think my junior and senior year of college. I was in a show at First Stage Children's Theater in Milwaukee. That was actually a co-production with Milwaukee Mask and Puppet Theater. And they had a bunch of different styles in the show. There were these great big pageantry puppets and some smaller ones, and this like weird big monster thing. We all got in. And that, we had some puppet-specific rehearsals early in the process, and the gentleman who was leading those, Max Sampson, I remember he said something sort of to the effect of like, "Oh, you seem to be taking to this naturally." And, you know, that sort of like stuck in my brain of like, oh, okay, well. And then that was just there for a while. Right after I graduated from college, I met Paul McGinnis when he was on tour with Little Shop of Horrors. And he gave me a tour of the stage and showed me the big Audrey 2. And I was like, how do you get to do this? He said, you have to go to the O'Neill. And I looked it up and I was like, wow, that's really expensive. But then maybe a year or two later, I got a fellowship through, I guess now they're called TYA USA. And I used that fellowship money for my first year at the O'Neill, which was 2007. And I was thinking about this earlier. I got to the O'Neill, it must have been the last night of the pre-conference. And, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know where I was. It was dark. I was like, all right, I'll just go to bed and we'll figure everything out in the morning. And so when I got up the next day and like saw the campus, it was, oh my gosh, where am I? And, within the first few hours, it was like, I have to come back. This is amazing. I had no idea what I was doing and felt like way out of my league. But it was all so cool and all very new, but I was like, more, just give me more. So that was sort of my first taste of actually formally learning it.
That's awesome. So. And do you remember who your what guest artist you were working with that first year?
Yeah, this was sort of in looking at the website and when I applied, like, again, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know who or what anything was. And I selected to work with Richard Germany because it said in his little bio thing that he had previously been an artistic director of the conference. And I was like, that seems like a good place to start. So he was directing a show written by a woman whose name can't remember. I'm gonna say it was Bonnie something, but she was sort of like a writer in residence. And she wrote this play about Kay Thompson, who wrote all of the Eloise books, but she was also a vocal coach to Judy Garland. So this play sort of incorporated those different facets of her life. It was a really interesting. I remember I got to work with. It was the first time I met Alyssa Honeycutt and Jane Martineau, and yeah, I was just sort of along for the ride on that. Like I did not know what I was doing, but and with the participant pieces, I was a little I don't know, overwhelmed by those too. I wasn't like ready to jump in and like make something of my own, but was totally willing to lend a hand to someone else. And I'm trying to remember that year, I worked with, I want to say, I worked with this guy, Steve from Austin, and I did someone else's too, but I can't remember whose it was. But I was a little intimidated at like taking on something of my own. So it wasn't until the third year I was there, I actually got guilt tripped into doing a participant piece. Because the second year I went, I think I was the first recipient of the Eric Engelhardt Scholarship. And I didn't know, or it wasn't like really hammered home that one of the requirements was you were supposed to do a participant piece. So my second year, I didn't do one either. I worked on other people's. And then the third year, Ron Binion pointed out, he was like, wait, you were the scholarship recipient last year, right? And you didn't do a participant piece? You need to do one this year. So that's where I did my first participant piece, which was called the Tallys.
And that was a piece that you were able to perform then at the 25th anniversary show, right? At the P of A festival in
right at the yeah.
That was a really great. Can you describe that for people who haven't seen?
That summer before the O'Neill, I had taken a road trip with a friend of mine and was thinking about everywhere we stopped for like when we stopped for gas or took a bathroom break or something, it made me start thinking about like, how many places have I gone to the bathroom in my life? And like sort of what
I don't want to know that for anybody.
well, but sort of what your personal statistics are. You know, like when you read those articles that says the average American eats 10 gallons of ice cream a year. It's like how many gallons have I eaten this year? Like what those numbers are that sort of make up your story but don't really mean anything. So when we were doing circle pitch at the O'Neill, I think I was towards the end and they were like, okay, make it short, let's go. And I think all anyone really heard was how many times or how many places have I gone to the bathroom in my life? I need more puppeteers. Okay, thanks. And then when you go into the little conference room with all the staff and they're like, okay, tell us what you need. What was your thing again? And they were like, oh, right, the poop piece. And I was like, I guess, like, I don't know what it is yet. I don't know what I'm doing. So I ended up with 2 other puppeteers, and because I knew I didn't want to be in it and trying to figure out what it was. But basically the premise is just that it's this couple, and they each repeat one line of dialogue, but they have a personal tally board which has categories with numbers, and the numbers changing tells you what's changed in the story. So that's and then the unexpected part for me was that it made everyone cry. So it was like, you all thought this was a piece about poop, and now you're all crying.
So it didn't turn out to be a crappy project after all.
But yeah, that was actually, I've been really lucky to have taken that. I did that piece in Chicago, Minneapolis, Austin, Boston, Portland, and then at the festival too. Yeah.
So there's quite a few tallies for the tallies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Got to get mine into.
I think I won though.
Yeah, you did. Something I wanted to ask about you finding the O'Neill in the first place, because it's not an easy conference to get into. And I know you mentioned having that relation with Paul McGinnis and such, but what was your artistic background that you think helped you get into that puppetry conference, if that was sort of your first main exposure to puppetry itself?
I went to school for theater, and at that point had sort of thought more about like programming for families and kids. And I had, right out of school, I was working with a group of folks on a project called the Bird Show. And we had these kind of fun bird masks and these kind of hobbled together weird costumes. And there were 2 performers who were on stilts, who were kind of like the parent birds. And it was more of like a spectacle or ritual sort of thing where we would try and involve the audience. Like we mainly did it in parks. We were downtown in Chicago at Millennium Park. We went to a festival in Wicker Park. We were out in Woodstock, Illinois. So I had some photos of that. And then I think I just included some of the projects I had done in school, which really weren't puppetry related at all, save from the working with First Stage and Milwaukee Mask and Puppet. So I don't know, like I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember what I included really, or what I said. I don't even know if I name dropped Paul. I might have, because I didn't really know him terribly well. I met him through. I had a friend who was working for Broadway in Chicago, and he'd said, "Oh, I have tickets for a little shop. Do you want to come see it?" And I said, "Great." And he said, "They're having a cast party at this bar," and I was like, "I don't like schmoozing. Ugh, and don't really hang out at bars." But then he said it was a dessert bar, and I was like, "Okay, I'll come." And then the puppeteers were there, and I was like, "Oh, I want to like meet these folks." So I remember chatting with some of them, and then Paul especially was really generous with his time to sort of talk to me about what I was doing or what I wanted to get into, and yeah. That's I couldn't tell. You'd have to ask Pam, I guess. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, you know what I think is interesting is I remember the first time that I applied, I thought, when I was filling out, I thought I had to like convince them that I was doing all this puppetry stuff and at the time. But and I've talked to other people when I was there too, and some people have very different backgrounds. I think as long as you just like are honest and open about you as an artist in general, that's your best shot. Because 'cause I totally went about it the wrong way the first time I applied.
Yeah, I think having folks from all different kinds of backgrounds and how they approach things, it's kind of a benefit, and they try to get that in the mix from what I gather.
Yeah. So once you kind of you were at the O'Neill for a couple of years, you had worked on the Tallys, you building relationships with other people. Was that what ended up leading you to? You worked in Iceland for a time, right, on Lazy Town?
Oh, I was just there for a week.
Okay.
I didn't really work on it. So the year that I did the Tallys, when you're working on a participant piece, generally you're assigned a mentor on staff, and I was lucky enough that Ron Binion took an interest in me in the project and was so wonderful in helping guide me through that process. And let's see, what year was that? Anyway, Ron was a puppeteer on Lazy Town and arranged it so that I could kind of intern there. I don't know if it was in an official capacity, but made it so that I could be there in the studio and see what they were working on, and got to have an up close look at how a TV show like that runs. So I think I got my hand in a couple of shots, but I wasn't really like working on it.
Gotcha. Okay, I thought you were there for a little bit longer. So what can you talk about some of the other professional opportunities that had sort of happened after you started working with the O'Neill?
Sure. So let's see, in 2011, yeah, I think at the 2011 P of A festival, I was talking with a group of folks who were there from Chicago. One of them was Julia Miller, who had been she's actually a member of Manual Cinema. And she had just co-curated one of the first puppetry cabarets, one of the first slams in the city in Chicago. And I had done the Tallys for that. And when we were in Atlanta, she said that the guy she was working with to curate it needed to sort of take that off his plate for the moment. And I was like, yeah, I would totally be interested in helping you out with that. So together, she and I were co-curating that cabaret, and I did that for probably like 2.5 years, like right up until I moved to New York. And that was really awesome. I liked getting to sort of wrangle people to come and try new stuff. I loved getting the chance to bring in out-of-town guests. Pretty much all of the folks we brought were people I had met at the O'Neill at some point. So that was really cool to get to share pieces that I knew were really great with the Chicago audience. So I was doing that. And then I had friends from the O'Neill who lived in New York who were like, when are you going to move to New York? And I was like, I'm not just going to show up and be like, okay, I'm here. But then I got the opportunity to work with WonderSpark Puppets. That's Z Briggs and Chad Williams. When she was pregnant with their first son, I came out to New York to fill in for her doing shows with Chad. And they offered me a 6-month contract doing that. And I was like, okay, that's enough of a something to be doing for 6 months to come and try it out, see what's happening. While I was like, okay, I'm going to try and learn what I can while I'm here and try and figure things out. I don't know, I'm going back to Chicago, what's happening. And I just kind of stayed, like actually coming up on my New York anniversary, I believe. It'll be 6 years. So I started working with WonderSpark. I was also part of the artistic direction committee for the P of A Festival in 2013.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too, because that came out of the 2011 conference as well, right?
Yep. I noticed, it hasn't come up again yet, but I'm sure it will, how sort of points on this trajectory have been influenced by donuts. Because, I went to that dessert bar, got to meet Paul McGinnis, where they had these amazing brioche donut bowls. The reason I went to the bar was because of the dessert. And then in 2011 at the P of A Festival, I met for breakfast at a donut shop with Robert Smythe and the other 5 folks who ended up being the artistic direction committee with me. And that was sort of our first, I think for all of us, that might have been it was my first national festival. And it was sort of like, what did you think? What would you do differently? And we kind of got the wheels turning about that.
And this was a group, it was you, Spencer Lott, Liz Hara, was it Carol D'Agostino and Amy Rush?
Amy was part of the, Amy took and ran with the fringe portion.
Okay.
But the Marta Mazel McCrosty was the other member of our artistic direction committee. And so we, I guess at that breakfast, had sort of signed ourselves up for the 2 years of planning leading up to Swarthmore in 2013. And getting to work with those folks was really great. I think having that sort of cohort to share both work and ideas with made it really worthwhile. And I think, a lot of the stuff we tried to accomplish came out of the ideas we created together. And I think I was a little, I hadn't the 2011 was the first national festival I went to, because I kind of always had this idea in my head. I didn't know what was in it for me. I kind of imagined them as, you know, hobbyists and, you know, for lack of a better word, like, you know, church lady shows and like things that like I didn't.
The Puppet Owners of America Festival.
Exactly. Which, you know, everyone has their place, but like, why do I need to be there? And in some ways, the festival did feel a little bit like that. I didn't, there were only a couple of performances that I was really wowed by, and the workshops I took were okay. So I think together as a team, we were really interested in trying to see how we could raise the bar a little bit and, you know, make space for everyone, but not have the lowest common denominator be sort of very beginning level. And I was, you know, really proud of that festival. I think in that regard, we were able to raise the bar a bit. You're not going to please everyone. This is, you know, something that you learn. And I don't even think we were trying to do. I think it was trying to make space for sort of early career professional people, like we were feeling we were, but then to also be able to present shows and workshops that would, you know, knock people's socks off. So yeah, and I think we did a lot of asking around of people, like, why do you come to festivals? What do you get out of it? And a lot of people, a lot of their responses had to do with community and making, so we specifically made time to connect with the community, not have it just be like racing from one thing to another. One thing that I really loved that we got to do was incorporate Jim and Judy Rose doing their tea time that they had, that they hold every year at the O'Neill, to incorporate that into the National Festival. That was the first time I ever got to do it because I hadn't done a Marionette Strand, and it was so wonderful. You know, Jim asks these amazing questions that, you know, can just get conversation rolling, and it was just great to have time to sit and talk and, you know, have it not just be rather superficial chit-chatty stuff, but like, you know, get to some meat. So that was really wonderful, and I think a lot of the workshops we offered definitely sort of raised the bar a bit. And my personal addition that I made sure had to happen was the dance party. So I was glad that went off as well.
And that was like sort of the big way that we kind of brought the festival to the conclusion, I think, right? That was last night.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of my favorite way to celebrate stuff. And there was like such a weird mix of people out on the dance floor that was so wonderful. I have very specific snapshots in my head of like Fred Thompson out on the dance floor. So yeah, that was 2013. And then since then, since I've been in New York, I've gotten to do a lot of really cool stuff. You know, I did those 6 months with WonderSpark, and while I was learning and doing those shows, I did an internship at Puppet Kitchen, and that was a my first introduction to a lot of different kinds of materials and tools, and I hadn't done much building prior to that. You know, it was more just trying to hot glue stuff together, and it's still how I do things sometimes, but so working with them was really wonderful, and they also were very community focused, but it wasn't something that was go to the head with. It was I think they were a really special studio because, you know, they would encourage everyone to sort of break for lunch at the same time, and getting to have a meal with someone and be able to connect sort of as humans outside of like just work talk, I think affects then how your talk happens while you're working. And they were just sort of a hub of all kinds of different great artists who were coming and going too. So I got to meet a lot of cool people that way, and got to work on a lot of cool projects, even post my time there as an intern. Got to build and teach and do other things with them. So working with them was awesome.
What projects were going through the shop at the time?
One of the last builds I got to work on was, there was a stage show of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and Eric Wright designed some adorable instruments that they used in that show. Actually, you should talk to those guys too.
Oh yeah, he's on our list. We've been communicating for a while. We gotta line it up.
So that was one of the last projects I got to work on with them. I don't remember all of the things I did with them. This was quite a few years ago. So H&M did a campaign they shot a spot that was really only running online, I think. You can Google H&M The Breakup, and they did all of the puppets for that, and a lot of Puppet Kitchen folks were in that. So you can spot me, but we all look the same because we're all in like these black bodysuits. That was a cool thing to get to do. It was, you know, kind of big and fancy, and
yeah. Didn't that then have a live incorporated piece in Times Square?
That
the same thing?
So that was different. That was a different campaign. It wasn't H&M. That was for LG. That was for their twin wash washing machine for clothes, and they had sort of similar in that it was giant clothes, but that was a laundry battle. So they built a giant set of pajamas, and then like a giant set of casual clothes, and they fought. That was another really cool thing to get to be a part of. That was a sort of big production, and that you can watch online if you just Google it.
Yeah. And did you have some time at the Henson Workshop as well?
Yeah. I've sort of been in and out of there. I'm not one of their regulars, but when they have need to bring in some extra folks, I'm lucky enough to be on that list every once in a while. And another thing I actually got to do, which was awesome, a couple years ago, I worked with, actually one of the first things I did when I came to New York, Daniel Fay had a piece in the St. Anne's lab. And so I did that. And then he was workshopping it again. And then he applied for and got to do the figure theater residency in Norway. So we were there for 2 months in 2016, which was amazing. The figure theater is in a little town in northern Norway called Stamsund. And they have the theater is right on the water, and they have 2 little black box studios, and they have like a wood shop and a paint area and a whole separate area for just like sewing and crafting. And the staff was amazing, and the scenery was gorgeous, and I didn't want to leave. So that was another really cool opportunity that came because of, I think I must have met Daniel Fay through Puppet Kitchen people. So yeah, it's been really cool to sort of backtrack and see where some of those connections happened and how far back they go.
Yeah, that's so indicative of what this community is just the ways that, one project leads to the next. And
for sure,
it's a testament to you and some of the other people you work with that you keep bringing in, some of the same folks, that you could rely on and you enjoy working with, that you just keep getting those jobs. I think that's something that young puppeteers especially need to really hold on to and embrace.
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of surprised sometimes at hearing people who work on projects that come away with a negative experience of it, like not being fun. Or when we were just at the residency in September, I was really sort of gung-ho on making sure that people had a good time, because I wasn't able to pay people what their time was actually worth. And, I wanted it to be fun for people. And one of the puppeteers said to me that they'd been talking on the phone to a friend, and the friend was like, "It sounds like you're actually having fun." And she was like, "Yeah, it's the first time in a long time." I was like, "Why are you doing it if it's not fun?" Like, it shouldn't, it is work, and it can be like serious focused work, but I just don't understand when people make it work that's not fun.
If there's not donuts and they're not dancing, then why do it?
Oh gosh. Yep. That's my legacy, I suppose.
So the next show should be Dancing Donuts. That's it.
All right. Yeah.
Perfect.
I'd go see that.
Well, just as we start to wrap up a little bit, something that we ask everybody who comes on the show is if they have a good Jim Krupa Puppeteers story of something that happened when you were either on a set or rehearsal or whatever, that something didn't go quite right, that now looking back, you're able to kind of laugh about.
Sure. Yeah. I knew you were going to ask this, and I had a hard time coming up with something until so the Tallys, the first thing I ever made, they have, 2, each character has a big cardboard piece that has the categories and these number sheets, and the number sheets were just on a hook, and they get removed as the story goes. I don't know why. The cardboard pieces were on top of these easels that Ron built, actually. I don't know why I had in my head that the easel should turn around for the start of it. Why it wouldn't just be lights up, they're there. But maybe we hadn't gone through it or something. So it's the time when you're showing all the participant pieces to everyone in the conference. Like, I'm a little bit nervous because the first thing I've made, my knees are shaking a little bit. Okay, the lights go up, they're turning around the easels, and the numbers all fly off. And they're like all over the floor, and they it has to be in a certain order so that it's And I was just like, it was fine, but it was not like, oh, okay, there's a lesson. They don't need to turn around. That's yeah.
Simple. See, I wasn't sure if you were going to say when the air conditioning went out in the Dina for
right. Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, that wasn't a huge, we made that work.
Yeah.
That was for when I was doing the resident emerging artist piece while you guys were at Resident Company, I think we had planned to perform in the Dina Merrill, which is a different sort of theater setup than in the barn. And you guys had practiced, I think, with a bit more distance because we still had the shadow component. And so all of that got compacted when we had to perform in the barn. But you guys are pros. You made it work. It was fine. You know, you kind of have to figure out how to adapt. And when we did the residency, we were in the barn, which actually was wonderful because we were able to kind of tuck the band under the loft a little bit, which was great because they weren't in your direct line of sight. And now I'm kind of like, what theater space could I have that again? But I've forgotten about having to change venues.
Yeah.
Oh well.
We persevere.
Yeah. I think a lot of people try to forget about some of those puppeteer moments that they
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have another question for you quick too. What advice would you give to a puppeteer who wants to take the jump and move to New York City?
I would say have a reason to do it. Like I still, had I not had the opportunity to work with Z and Chad doing WonderSpark stuff, I still don't think I would have just shown up. Unless there's a particular opportunity that that you can partake in.
Yeah.
For sure. Like I know that there have been folks who've come here specifically to do internships at specific places, or I kind of feel like that's the way to do it. Like it's not, for me, there's been a lot of sort of give and take thinking about your living situation and all that sort of stuff. It's not easy.
Yeah.
If there's stuff happening where you live, do that, learn from those sorts of people. And the thing that I did sort of feel when I was in Chicago, I loved doing the cabaret and I loved that was happening. I did sort of feel like people were kind of still staying in their own little pockets and there weren't as many people for me to learn from. So I was glad to have the opportunity to come here and learn from more people. But I would say don't do it without a very specific opportunity.
That's interesting. I think an argument that other people make too is that they feel like they have to be there to get those opportunities as well. Because I could see like some employers and stuff saying like, oh, well, this person lives out of state, so we'll go with this person instead. So, it's kind of interesting and it's cool that WonderSparks was willing to, definitely take you in, seeing that you weren't local. So that's really cool.
That is I met both of them through the O'Neill. And I think having that connection, I guess if you have solid enough connections here prior to, and because I definitely, the first couple of weeks I was here, I hadn't arranged an apartment to stay in yet, and was relying on staying on couches of people I knew. And without those kind of connections, it's just, I feel like it's harder than your outcome, the benefit would be. So, go to go to slams, go to festivals, go to the O'Neill, go to places where you can make those connections. And I think it's really wonderful. I know people all over the country now because of festivals and the O'Neill and the sort of larger puppetry community. So there's stuff happening all over. It's not just here, even though it sometimes might seem like that.
Awesome.
So I don't know. Yeah, that's what I would.
Good takeaway.
So how can people get in touch with you or find out what projects you're working on and stuff like that?
I have a website, hellojessicasimon.com, or my sort of like artist Facebook page is Jessica Simon and Co. Those are probably the places that I would update with any kind of news about what I've got going on.
Cool.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, Jessica Simon, thank you so much for joining us on Puppeteers. It was really good catching up with you, and so glad to share your work with everybody. So
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
look forward to following your project. So cool. Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Hey guys.
Bye.
Thanks.